A few years ago, sci-fi horror fans like me were blown away by an absolute gem of a game called Dead Space. It was a dark and terrifying experience soaked in atmosphere, and it had a surprisingly rich and detailed, if kind of insane, story. I and so many others just couldn't wait for the sequel, and the game's publisher EA knew that very well. After the breakout success of the original Dead Space, the series morphed into something very different. Dead Space 3 was filled with focus group friendly action and shootouts. It offered players an absolute bounty of ammunition and supplies, which just removed any element of survival horror gameplay, and it also included microtransactions. At best, it was just a distant cousin of the original, far from the younger brother, built from the same DNA that it should have been. And now the series is effectively dead. Space. But it just didn't have to be this way, did it, EA? Dead Space 3 was not like the original Dead Space. As an enormous fan of the series, I still enjoyed it. It was still fun, it was still dark, and there was still plenty of terrifying aliens. Lots of terrifying aliens, actually. Too many terrifying aliens. As any fan of the series knows, Dead Space went from Resident Evil in space, full of survival horror elements and real atmosphere, to Resident Evil 6 in space, full of action and set pieces and shooting and fun stuff like that. The second Dead Space dialed up the action from the original, but in my book, still kept that sense of tension mostly intact. But by the time Dead Space 3 rolled out, like the Resident Evil series it had so brilliantly emulated in the first place, it had become an action-heavy feast of giant monsters, shootouts, and set pieces. It was not as scary, it was not as inspired, and not nearly as enjoyable as the original. And shockingly, it turns out that was all EA's fault. Speaking to Eurogamer's Chris Bratt this week, Dead Space 3 creative director Ben Wanat revealed his original vision of a much deeper and darker game. His Dead Space 3 would have delved deeper into the psyche of the game's troubled protagonist Isaac Clarke, who has seen some stuff. But EA saw things differently. They wanted to elevate the series beyond the 2 million sales of the original. They wanted it to sell 5 million, and as a result, they had a lot of input into the game's tone and content at a very senior level. They wanted an action game. They wanted multiplayer. Wanat revealed that they took this on board as far as multiplayer goes and came up with an awesome sounding co-op which would see two players playing essentially two halves of Isaac's personality. Over time they would be shown different things in game and would have to decide between them what is real and what isn't. But EA said that dementia should not be such a big part of a video game, and co-op character Shadow Isaac was ditched in favour of the super memorable Sergeant John Carver. EA were also the ones that insisted on putting microtransactions into the game's crafting system. I realise that sentence is so unbelievably obvious it doesn't need saying, but hey, at least we've got some kind of evidence now. Wanat said the microtransactions were a very sensitive subject. It's always one of those things that's like, oh man, other people are doing it and marketing says we can make X amount of money if we put it in. At some point, someone triggers it. The crafting system was never meant to be a microtransaction system. Now that last bit would be the perfect epitaph for Dead Space's gravestone. Putting aside the obvious aren't EA a bunch of dicks rant, it's kind of understandable from their perspective why they made the decisions that they did. EA need to make money. They needed Dead Space to be profitable, and in their eyes that means selling 5 million copies. Maybe the changes that they wanted, that Wanat is talking about here, is really the best way to make the most amount of cash out of a game like Dead Space. But recently that kind of corporate thinking has kind of been turning around. These days we see EA themselves appealing to their core audience in a way that they just haven't done for a long time. Last year they gave us a fresh and complete Battlefield game after f***ing up so badly with Star Wars Battlefront and Battlefield Hardline. Even Capcom, as in DLC already is on the disc Capcom, pulled a blinder just this January with Resident Evil 7, producing probably the best Resident Evil game in the last 10 years. And why was that? They ditched the more action-oriented tropes that the series had been growing more and more reliant on in favour of the slower-paced tension building of the original Resident Evil. Maybe with this kind of thinking, the kind of thinking that appeals to the core audience again, we might see a Dead Space 4. A Dead Space 4 which goes back to the survival horror roots that, you know, made the game a success in the first place. Also in the news this week, Sony seems to have revealed that their oldest and dearest mascot Crash Bandicoot might not be staying exclusively on PlayStation. The official PlayStation Ireland Twitter account tweeted that the upcoming Crash Bandicoot N. Sane trilogy will come to the PS4 and PS4 Pro first, which immediately sparked interest that the remake might release on other platforms. Sony doesn't actually own the IP to Crash Bandicoot. Activision does, and I guess they've got some sort of timed exclusive with Sony. But even so, I don't know, it just kind of feels a little bit weird to see Crash Bandicoot 1, 2 and 3 on anything other than PlayStation, because that trilogy is just so strongly associated with the PlayStation brand. So it is going to feel weird to see that trilogy on other platforms, but at least a wider audience get to enjoy those games now. Next up in the news this week, the Humble Bundle has always impressed with its ability to make loads of great games available for dirt cheap, while making a crap ton of cash for charity in the process. The Humble Freedom Bundle is the latest one to knock it out of the park, raising $6.5 million for charity. The proceeds went to the American Civil Liberties Union, International Rescue Committee, and Doctors Without Borders. The bundle featured 41 games from different developers, all for the low price of $30. Seriously, this bundle was massive and included the likes of Stardew Valley, The Witness, and Super Meat Boy. It currently stands as Humble's second most successful bundle ever. And something else that caught our eye this week was a recent interview with Todd Howard over at the website Glixel. Todd Howard, executive producer at Bethesda Game Studios, said his company currently has not one, not two, but 3 new games in the works. Howard was reluctant to give out any specific details, but he did say that the number includes 2 classically Bethesda games and a new mobile game. Howard went on to say that the games are bigger than anything the company has ever done before, but are in the same wheelhouse as previous Bethesda games, which hopefully isn't the wheelhouse full of buggy, broken, unfinished games. This is the Saturday Show, so let's take a look at some of your comments. David Show comments on our Horizon Zero Dawn review roundup video. For f***'s sake, if they don't give Aloy some gloves to protect from rope burns, I'm gonna go mad. Yeah, I don't know about that, man. I mean, rope burns are probably her lowest priority in a world full of robot dinosaurs that are trying to kill her. Flaming Liger comments on our Horizon video. My hype for this game is like my cat's balls. It's non-existent. Does anyone else not find it a little bit weird that chopping cats' balls off is just like a normal, accepted part of life? Removing the testicles from an animal is a thing that we do. I mean, what the f is wrong with us? Toolshed video comments, when will you review Killblaze? Oh, I feel like there's got to be a game called Killblaze. I haven't researched it, but I feel like there's got to be a game out there somewhere. There's like some browser-based game or some indie title on Steam or something like that. There's got to be a game called Killblaze. Great Nightspeed comments on our Horizon Zero Dawn review roundup. Though this game doesn't look like my cup of tea, my compliments to Sony and Guerrilla for actually finishing and getting the game out off to a strong start. Yeah, you know, that is definitely the best thing about all this to me. I mean, the fact that it's a finished product, the fact that they got reviews out, I mean, a week and a half or something like that before the actual release of the game, that's just fantastic. That is the way it should be done. Everyone should be looking to that as an example. The week before we had For Honor, no review copies for that. I mean, you can fall back on the online-only argument, but then the game comes out and the peer-to-peer thing is bullshit. Contrast this with early reviews for a game that is getting reviewed very strongly and probably will enjoy good sales as a result. Also, thanks for the polite comment. Why can't everyone else comment like that? And commenting on last week's Saturday show, Azrael Sword says, naming someone an icon before their game is released seems premature. Fans will crown whatever they like as the platform icon, so let their games speak for them. But honestly, does anyone really care? Well, I mean, aside from the fact that you left a comment that does kind of imply that you care a little bit, I'm definitely inclined to agree. That is kind of the point of the video, that I think what we were trying to make was that you can't dictate to us what is going to become an icon. You can't slap the icon label on something that isn't even available to the wider public to get their hands on and stuff yet. It's just part of their marketing jargon, I guess, at the moment, and the way they conduct interviews, the way they present pre-order stuff to us. An icon has to be something very, very significant. You can see from the PlayStation Twitter accounts and stuff, since that guy made those comments, they've been, you know, I've seen a few tweets where it's been like, Nathan Drake, you know, ... Kratos, ... Aloy, question mark? Like, well, yeah, well, just hang on. Hold your horses, PlayStation. It's fair that they want her to be an icon, but that should be behind the scenes. They should be orchestrating that and pushing that, rather than telling us, oh, here you go, here's a new icon, enjoy. Thanks a lot for watching this week's Saturday show, as always, guys. Any other Dead Space fans out there? Do you feel the same way about the series as I do? Do you wish there was a Dead Space 4 that was a proper Dead Space game? Let us know down in the comments. Remember to leave a like and subscribe if you did enjoy the video. Check out more of our content right here. We'll see you next time.